Burton and I'm an aeromodeller and an engineer. Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. So, looking at the elevators, which is a good place to start if you've had a bit of a rest and want to get back into it. And actually I've made a bit of a hash of this and I'll show you show you what I did wrong in a minute. But so I'm going to work on the elevators just to get back into the groove. So down in the workshop, I've got my drill press set up with a permagrit grinding bit in it, tungsten bit in it. Set the bed so that, there we go, you should just be able to see it, that the sanding drum is going to take roughly an 1/8 or 3/32 off of the wood, and I've marked out where I want it to go. So what I'm going to do is actually follow the inside surface of that piano wire, and I'll explain it later when you see the rest of the model. Here is the Jerry Bates plan for the tailplane and the elevators. As you know, we've already built the tailplane and we've modified it quite a bit at the front. The internal structure is different as well, but we've modified it so that there's a dowel location, and this is allowing us to take the tailplane off the model for shipping and transporting, because I'm hoping to take this maybe abroad over to Europe, do a few events over there. So the tailplane's done and modified. So the way we're going to do the elevators, the way Jerry has done it, he's used a 1/16 ply core. My hero Brian Taylor does it this way, but he doesn't use ply, he uses a balsa core. I'm going to stick with the Jerry Bates ply core. Now the way they work is that you add these sections, that's the bottom, and you add it like this, and this goes on the top to give you the thickness of the leading edge, as you can see. You carefully align them up obviously before you glue them. These notches are for the hinges, and they'll be robot pin hinges. The thickness of these have got to be chamfered down, and the leading edge has got to be radiused, but it's radiused at a tighter radius at the tip than at the root, as you can probably expect. And actually sanding these when they're glued to the core is going to be quite difficult around this area here. What also makes this very difficult is when you glue these blocks on, you've removed access to the elevator horn. And the way the elevator horn works is you have a piece of bent piano wire like this. The lug you see, the hinge point you see there, goes into the tailplane like that. In fact, this one is this side, goes in like that, and that's how it operates, and the elevator fits into these holes here. So as you can see, by creating this, let's say we're about there, I think. By creating this elevator the way Jerry has done it, you have to make this first. That's fair enough, that's not a problem. This is bushed with a brass tube, so I'm going to make 2 new ones of these. This was just to get the dimensions right and to show you what the problem is. But what you do is you brass bush this piece of ply or G10 glass fibre board if that's what you'd prefer to make it out of, but you bush it and you slide this on to the piano wire before you bend this final joint so that it's a nice snug fit. Then you bend the final joint. But the problem is, to build the tailplane or the elevator the way Jerry wants, you have to glue the base bit onto the elevator, onto the core, like that. And then you have to feed, this is upside down, but don't worry about it. You get the idea. You put that in there, and then you trap it with the other one. Okay? That means, if I can just hold this all together, like that, you've got all this rattling around while you're trying to build the tailplane. And what I was wondering is there another way we could do this that might alleviate the problem? I'll do the other one while I'm here. And the idea is that should just slot into there. Like that. There'll be some packing over the top and the bottom to give it something to key to. That's the idea, it just slots out. Okay, let's do the other one. You can see here the errors I made. I routed on the wrong side, but actually the saving grace is that we actually lose 1/8 of an inch off the thickness of this anyway, so that's not a problem. But it caused me some swearing at the time. We'll let those dry for a while and then we'll start shaping. Just thought I'd show you the Robart pin hinges and how they work on this particular model. So as you can see, Jerry has drawn slots and they've been cut accordingly. If you actually try and fit the Robarts in there, they won't fit in the slots. So a little bit of filing and fettling and you can get it so that the pins fit in nicely. The hinge line will be right on the right there, so right in the center of the piano wire. So the hinge line runs right through there, but you can slide these in and out a little bit, so we're good. So that's how they're done, and then you simply put a little bit of block over the top of the pockets, and there you go. That's how they're done. Okay, so I've put the hinges in, and looking at the plan, we should have a 1/16 inch gap between the trailing edge of the tailplane and the leading edge of the elevator. So I've used just little bits of scrap 1/16 to push the two together fully and hold that gap. Now what we can do now is we can take a pen and we can draw along the trailing edge tailplane on the top and the bottom surface. Try not to disturb anything. And then if we remove the tailplane, the elevator, I keep saying tailplane, right, we now have a line, top and bottom, that we can plane this to. So that'll be the next step. I'm just going to pop these hinges out of their pockets, or out, not pockets, I haven't used pockets, but out of their slots. So now the next thing to do is to plane that down to that, and then we have to radius this to a perfect semicircle. Okay, more in a bit. Okay, I've stripped some, this is actually 1/8, it's supposed to be 332, but it's quite a light 1/8, so I'm quite happy with it. Should be fine. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay in these ribs, and they're fairly straightforward to do. To make sure that I get them straight, I'm going to use an engineer's square. This one's pretty straightforward because it's right up against that hinge pocket doubler protector, whatever you'd like to call it. Right, so along the rear edge of this trim tab, the trailing edge, we've got some 1/8 as well. So what I want to do first is I'm just going to have a look at how far ahead of the trailing edge, and it's 1/4 of an inch, 6mm. So, oops. So we're 6mm up from the trailing edge. The port elevator. I would normally speed all this video up because I'm sure you know all about all this and know how to do it, but I've had 1 or 2 people ask me to continue to talk while I'm building, and that they want to hear the talking, which kind of means I can't fast forward because obviously I would sound really odd. So you're going to have to see it all. Oops. This is only really a guideline because when I sand them it'll dictate where the ribs end anyway. Okay, so I'll start with the left hand elevator because there's more ribs on this, so it's a bit more interesting. Have to go from that side. So take the stock, lay it in, give it a mark. And trim it to length. Now it's important you get these nice and straight and true because they will show through the covering. So you need these to sit properly. Now I am going to just lightly sand that face. This CA is taking a long time to set, but it is finally setting. So I think you get the general idea. I'm just going to go and continue to add these sections of balsa until I've completed the elevator. And there we go. That's the first elevator half. This is the port side. and all the riblets are added. We just need to plane this down to those lines and sand it, nice radius on the front, and sand it flat to the trailing edge. Now normally I would use a tissue or something like polyester fabric on here attached with dope. I'm not going to do that in this case because I want a really sharp trailing edge, and I also don't want the fabric to stick to the flat surface of this. I want it to be sharp. So I'm going to use a covering that will shrink with heat that I attach with glue, and I can only glue that back line there. That's it. And then let it tauten over the rest of it and not stick down. Okay, so that's the plan anyway. All right, now to do the other one. Something about using a razor planer, so satisfying. And there we are, down to the line. Certainly easier to pick up shavings than it is sawdust. Unfortunately, the next phase after the planing is making sawdust. Now let's see if we can take some of the ribs down as well. Should be able to. So I'm going to start with a 45-degree chamfer. And the way you can tell whether it's 45 degrees is when the distance between the leading edge and the line, when you've halved it, you've gone to the 45-degree mark. And you should be able to also look on this edge and see where you've gone from the mid-plane to the outside edge. If you've gone halfway, you're 45 degrees there. And I haven't quite. What I've done is I've actually got slightly more of an angle, so I'm just going to take a little bit more off of this edge here. That's more like it's half looking from this way and it's half looking from that way. So I think that's our chamfer. So what we do then is we do another chamfer on this edge and this edge, again halving the distances. there we have it. That's pretty close to the radius that we drew on the end. Now I'm just going to tickle it with my little block just to get the radius. I'm really pressing very lightly, hardly taking any wood off at all, just to that line. And there you go. That's radiused perfectly. So it's a certain radius there, a bigger radius than there, and it's equal. Okay, so now I'll do the other side. Now what I like to do under this is to find all the structure on the full size so that we've got all the proper markings on it. I also need to relieve these areas here, which I'll do now, because I don't want these showing through the covering. So they mustn't touch the outer surface. They mustn't touch the fabric. You can see there now, this is recessed below the rib, so the fabric won't touch that. I've got to do the same at this end, hide that one. So that one's radiused. Just need to add the tip now, and this one's done. Okay, that's the elevator's radius, the leading edges of both of them radiused nicely. So next thing I want to look at is the tips. Now these should be 1/4 inch thick, and 4 of them, but these are actually more like well, let's see exactly how thick they are. They're 1/2 inch. So if we glue these on as they are, we've got 1/4 inch planing to do. So I'm going to get them to line up on the ply core, and I'm not going to worry too much about overhangs and things like that. I'm just going to nip that bit of labour cutting off. I may as well do them all while I'm at it. I'm going to just use tight bond on these. That's that one on there like that. Yep, that's nice. I'm going to do it on the right side, haven't I? A couple of clamps, if they'll go around this. Yeah, just about. That should sort that out. Do the same on the other one. So if we let those dry, and then when we're next in the workshop, I'll get the razor plane onto those, and we'll lose the edges of those. It's really nice having the hinge pockets done and everything. It's quite easy for me to now fit the elevators to the tailplane and shape the tips to match everything. So really quite pleased with that. I think while these are drying, I'll go over to the PC and I'll have a look at some full-size pictures I've got of the elevators uncovered, so I can get a feel for what needs to go underneath these. What I'd like to do is use these and the rudder as test pieces for the covering. So we'll just have to see how that goes, and I'm not sure what I'm going to use yet. I was going to use polyester, the same as I used for the Oster videos that you've seen, but I've been shown a new stuff which is a polyester tissue, and it seems very, very impressive. It's ironed on as usual, it's heat shrunk, and then a couple of coats of dope to seal it. I'm quite tempted to try it. What I don't want is this is quite critical on this one, is I do not want the fabric to touch and stick to this core. I want it to stick to the back, and I want a lovely sharp. It may not be possible, but that's what I'm aiming for, because on the full size the fabric doesn't stick to this. I was tempted to actually add some balsa along the back to give it a lip to sit on, a defined edge, but that's not accurate either. So I need to do a bit of research, and I'll do that before we carry on. Okay, here's an interesting problem. What we have is the elevator half, or one of the halves of the elevator. You can see I've added a 64th inch thick enforcing plate, because this end is susceptible to damage, and you need a crisp edge. You don't want this to round off, so I've added a bit of 64th ply. So I want to do the same at this end. And you think, oh, well, how am I going to do that? I could make a piece with a big circular cut in it or something like that to enable, a piece of ply, 64th inch ply, such as this piece, to fit in there. But if you think outside the box, a fairly straightforward and simple solution, and this is again using some of the tools that I showed in the tools video. This saw here has not got a spine to it, so it's a flexible one. And if you use this, you can get right into that gap there. Use it as a pull saw. I know it sounds terrible, but it's actually not as bad as it looks, not as bad as it sounds. It's going through quite a bit at each pass. Now I only need to go down to the hinge line, and I'm actually cutting the plywood core in the centre, but as you can see there's a load of meat here, so it's not going to do any harm. So that's a slot cut there, so you think, okay, great, I'll just slide that into there. 64th, the saw blade is actually thicker than a 64th. So if you then take your piece of 64th and sand it down just against your fingertip, you'll find it's fairly easy to make it quite a bit thinner. You can see how I've gone through the laminations. And now if that is then pushed up against there, it fits straight in. Bit of super glue all the way around the edge. And the job's a good one. Simple, eh? So as you can see, I've shaped the tips, just a bit of planing and sanding, and we've got those sorted. I've also added a diagonal brace, which is on the full size. It might be seen underneath the fabric, so we've included that. I've added some little 16th inch packing shims to the rear edge of the tailplane. This gives me an accurate 1/16 gap to the leading edge of the elevator. This is how it will be when it's finished. They're just used to jig everything at the moment, but it's all looking, you know, really good. I'm really pleased, and you know, the radiuses are all good, so nothing rubs. It's really nice. So I'm very pleased. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been fun to make. If you have enjoyed it, please click like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next video. Cheers.